I talk a lot about the importance of belonging. That sense of belonging is essential for making sure our customers keep coming back for more and that they get the results that they came for. Now, there's one person that I've talked to about this for the last couple of years, but I've never actually brought him on the podcast. His name is Jon Berghoff, and he is an absolute pioneer in the area of transformational facilitation. What are we talking about? We're talking about how to actually run your live calls, your virtual events, and your in-person gatherings, and how to do it in a way that doesn't lean on you as the expert or guest experts even, but actually the collective wisdom of the group. Now, there's a beautiful way to choreograph these events, and guess what? His entire business, the Xchange approach, is built around just that, teaching people how to choreograph and design these gatherings so that people experience belonging, insight, clarity, and results. So because I recommend so often that you host live calls, that you host gatherings, I wanted to bring Jon on to walk through how he designs these experiences so that you can start applying them to your programs. Now, there's a lot of people out there that will teach you how to run a live call inside of your program. In fact, I have many templates inside of my Retain system that teach people how to run live calls. But Jon does it with a science and an art that is really unmatched. And that's why he's been hired by companies like Facebook, BMW, NASA, Google, Stanford University to come in and design events for their employees. So if you want to learn how to unlock the collective wisdom in your group and help your group reach its highest potential without all of the weight being on you to show up as the expert, then you're absolutely going to love this episode. Well, Jon, I'm super excited to be having this conversation because I can't remember how many years ago it was. My friend Leslie is like, you need to know Jon Berghoff and everything that he's doing at Xchange because it's right up your alley. You all talk about the same things. You're both obsessed with this idea of belonging and how do we create that. And we've had a couple of opportunities to connect since then, which has been good. But I don't know why it's taken us this long, but here we are finally bringing the rest of the world into the conversations that we've had about belonging. I'm really excited to dive into that, to dive into your unique group facilitation approach that helps create a sense of belonging in a really unique way. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, Shana, thanks for having me. And yeah, I don't know, timing's perfect as it is, and I'm happy to be chatting with you today.
So let's talk a little bit about belonging. Now, I talk a lot about it on the podcast, and people have heard me say over and over again, when you give people the sense of belonging, they show up more fully in the world. And that's what we want, is people who really show up, feel safe to show up fully as their whole self in every space in which they belong, whether that be at work, whether that be at home as a parent. And I'm often referencing Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how safety and all of these things precede belonging. So none of that is really unfamiliar to anybody that's listened to the podcast for a while. But I'd love to hear a little bit about how you discovered this concept of belonging and really your passion and unique gifting for creating it.
Well, as you know, I appreciate the question, and I appreciate it for a lot of reasons. And the first thing that comes up, because we can talk about belonging a lot of different ways. You mentioned the word safe or psychological safety. Like there's a biological experience of belonging. We can talk about that. There's a mythological element, like, do I belong to this group, so to speak? And then there's even like a historical conversation around this moment in time and why any of us that care about helping people to feel this experience of belonging, it's a good thing to do. But I'll tell you what came up for me, and I really don't share this very often as a way to come into this topic. I've come to realize in the last maybe 5 or 10 years that the reason my work, and I bet this is true for so many people when they look at what they now do as a grown-up, I didn't realize for how many years that what I was doing was trying to heal some wounded part of myself because of, candidly, a really traumatic time in my life when I was younger, when I just didn't belong. So for me, the learning comes from a really painful place. And I think that's why, even though for years of teaching facilitation and leading in a company, I wasn't even using that word, but I was totally unconscious. That's what I was trying to create. And now, like, I get to work with people on our faculty who are just some of the smartest people on the planet who are like, oh, yeah, there's like a neurological, biological, scientific explanation. There's data that says this is important. For me, it was unconscious for a long time. It was like I was trying to heal what it was like to not belong. So I don't know, that's what comes up in the moment as a starting point.
Yeah. And you don't even realize that you're doing it, but there's this gap or this hole that needs to be addressed. And so your body just innately is driven towards solving that underlying problem. And I relate to that a lot. I think I've shared with our listeners before that I had a similar journey of not really understanding why creating community was so important to me until I did some therapy work and really made the connection that when we had a very traumatic event in our family when I was 13, that became sort of public. I went from like being the most popular girl in school and thinking I had belonging and I had community to losing it all and feeling very abandoned and very isolated for many, many years and not feeling understood because the unique situation that we were walking through in our family was just unheard of where we lived. And going to college and telling myself the story, I'm going to this school because nobody knows me and I can identify myself as whoever I want. And I don't have to be known as the girl who had this happen to her anymore. So I'm going to go and leave that behind. And of course, didn't take long before I realized that I couldn't live that way. I couldn't live not being fully known and actually experience belonging. So it was that process of understanding that being known and having some level of vulnerability was required to even feel belonging and breaking through that barrier of not being able to trust people, right? So it's fascinating because I never made that connection, even though I was writing papers in college about online communities and belonging way back in the day before it was really a thing. And I've spent my whole career trying to work on that, as have you. So it's interesting that we're both trying to solve for that in some way. But I think it's always true that somehow our story and our woundedness ends up becoming how we have the greatest impact in the world. So I'm curious, like, I know you, like you said, you started with group facilitation and then recognized how that was creating belonging. So tell me a little more about that.
Yeah. So there was a time about 12 years ago where I had ended up in a position where I was an executive for the Vitamix Corporation. They make high-end blending equipment, blenders.
My favorite. I use it every day. Obsessed.
Okay. Well, at some point, I want to hear your favorite recipes. And thank you for your purchase, by the way. So at a pretty young age, I was the head of sales. And I had this one inner voice that was like, way to go, man. Look at you. I was like 27. I had 200 salespeople reporting to me. We were already in 88 countries when I got there. And I had another little voice that was like, dude, you have no idea how to do whatever you just landed. And what happened was, over about 5 years, I noticed that the way we ran our meetings, in particular our sales meetings, was such an important source of leverage on everything we were trying to achieve. We were trying to share knowledge across the globe. We're trying to strengthen our culture. We're trying to navigate a lot of change in the industry. And I realized, like, this sounds so embarrassingly simple, but the way we design and lead our meetings might be our greatest source of leverage. It could be one of our biggest investments into trying to do all these things. And so what I realized during that period of time was that the way we would lead these meetings, if we did it in a way that connected our people to each other, then something was happening where they would feel safe in their own skin. They could now lean in and kind of tap into their more creative selves. They could work better together. So that was kind of the beginnings. And then after a beautiful journey with Vitamix, we grew like it was just like nothing else. And I just had a vision. I'm like, I think I could bring this to the world. I didn't really know how. And we founded our company about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. And at first, I just went and facilitated all these events for friends of mine and other people. And then as I was facilitating their events, I realized, oh my gosh, like if we can figure out how to lead these experiences in ways where, like your story and my story, I didn't know that about you. But as I hear it, it's like the challenge we both had was our bodies and our whole being didn't know if we could be who we were and still fit in with the people around us, right? Like every human is asking some version of that question. And what I stumbled into is like, oh my gosh, if I lead gatherings, workshops, retreats, masterminds, it doesn't matter what it is, in a way where we can create the experience of belonging, everything else that people came there for becomes even more possible. And they want to come back because there's different sources of value and ways to tap into potential in a group. But what we call communal capital, which is one of 3 forms of capital, that's the reason people want to come back. I know you're a trailblazer in teaching people about retention. Our little corner of community building that we play in is what happens when people get together. And if we can create that experience, there is nothing that motivates them to want to be a part of that group and come back again and again. So that's a little bit about the origin of it for me.
What I love about this is that when we start working with a client, they are often hosting lots of virtual events, right? And it's almost always talking at somebody. It's like a live training or a live guest expert. And I know myself as a consumer. If that's going to be the experience, if there's nothing interactive, I will 100% always wait for the replay so I can 2x it, get it done more efficiently and move on with my life, right? But we want to show up for is that interaction and that connection. And I think during the pandemic, a lot of people learned that online events could facilitate some type of community, some type of connection for people. But then we just put everything online. It was like, put everything on Zoom, do it all on Zoom. And it wasn't really done in a thoughtful manner. And we started to forget that humans are humans, even when they're in a virtual setting. And so one of the biggest changes we make often when we first start working with a client is by incorporating interaction, whether that be somebody coming on live and being able to share, whether that be breakout groups. We've been utilizing those for years, and they're often the most attended aspect of the membership, but that alone has a big impact on show up rates and retention. And I know you facilitate it in a way that is different than just sending people into breakout rooms. It's different than just being like, raise your hand if you have a question. And when I experienced it for the first time, I was like, wow, there's so much intention and study and thought and psychology behind what's happening here that I think 95% of the people in the room don't even realize what is going on that has led them to this kind of experience. And the beauty of it is that it is about the collective wisdom of the group. And so many membership owners feel the weight of responsibility on them as the owner to continually come up with new ideas, to continually bring the value over and over and over again. And their dream is for their membership to be a place where they may be the vision caster, they may be the tone setter and the culture creator. But at the end of the day, where the real value lies is in the collective wisdom and experience of the group and that sharing experience, whether it be in person or live. And we have membership owners who do both. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that. Like, what is that secret sauce that you have, if you will, that takes something from just another in-person gathering where we do little table breakouts every now and then after a speaker speaks, or send people into quick breakout rooms for a second, to actually something where people have this incredible, unique learning from each other and leave feeling more connected and still empowered and making more progress than they ever would in any other kind of experience?
Well, what you're asking about, Shana, is if my team was here listening, they would think, how's he going to answer this in less than 28 hours? Oh my gosh.
Right. Yeah. Because that is your that's all you do. And I want people to recognize that. Like, you and your team, you eat, sleep, and breathe group facilitation, both in person and online through this approach. And that there's certifications around it. There's a whole experience around it. So this isn't something that's like, pay $27 for your 60-minute workshop and leave an expert. And if you haven't experienced it before, which I highly encourage you all to experience it before you judge it, because I think if you've never experienced this kind of facilitation, it would be easy to be like, oh yeah, I've done that before. It's just a breakout session. But that's what I want to give people a little taste of, or a little understanding of. How is this different from just breakout groups at your table at an in-person event or being sent into a Zoom breakout room?
Sure. So maybe I can pick a story or two to give a real example of what you're illuminating, because we can say things like collective wisdom and collective intelligence, and there's research behind it, and there's a how-to, but I think if it's something that somebody has not consistently experienced, the best thing I could do is illuminate it with like real examples. So top of mind for me, and I was talking to you about this earlier, 10 days from today, I and our team are hosting our community in our annual community summit. The name of the event is called Transformation by Design. And it's an event we host for our members and some of their guests. And I'll tell you a few things that are interesting about the event. So, number one, just to appeal to the interest of any listener, this event has sold out months in advance for years, and we don't have to do anything to advertise it. So that's a data point. Data point number two, and this has been true for many years, there's no speakers on the agenda. It's 2.5 days. The entire experience is learning that is sourced from the participants through a series of interactions and experiences where either we give a question or multiple questions that the whole room explores, or we lead a process where they are generating their own questions and answers with and for each other. But 2 weeks from now, I'm going to lead a 2.5 day experience where there's no speakers on the agenda. So one of the things you mentioned is the weight as a community leader of, I've got to carry it. Well, once you know how to design and facilitate so that members and students become peers and teachers and coaches to each other, when you can turn the room like into the stage, it opens up an entirely new opportunity. And it's really good for business too, because it's an expensive, hard to sustain model if we make the reason to come to the event because I got the next 3 awesome speakers. And I think I heard you say this a minute ago, that the modern customer, you and I, and the people that we want to serve, like we stopped watching television a certain way about 30 years. Remember, you and I would know this. You remember when you had to sit down Sunday night at 8? Because if we didn't, we were going to like miss that TV show, right? So anyone listening to this, depending on their age, they're like, what is he talking about?
I know. And you had to like run and go to the bathroom during the commercial break. And you would like sit there and be like, and then you'd be listening, oh, it's back. And everybody's running back to the couch.
Yeah. So it was 30 years ago that the technology came around so that we didn't have to sit down. So like today, when it comes to content and information, the problem is not just that content has been commoditized and democratized. It's that as a consumer of information and content and inspiration, you and I expect, like someone watching or listening to this, they're consuming it when they want, on the device they want, at the speed they want. And that's nice. So part of what anybody who's leading an event and wants to build community needs to be really thoughtful about is, and this comes back to, in our world, there's like 3 sources of value. The event I'm hosting in 2 weeks. And one of them is intellectual capital, ideas people want to learn. But what we're not going to do is have people show up live and spend the entire time having everybody listen to a few people when in today's age, they kind of think, shouldn't we just have recorded this, right? And now somebody listening could think, oh my gosh, this guy is confronting entire industries. I'm not saying there's not a place for teachers and great teaching. We just need to evolve and expand beyond this industrial model of putting on events, right? So in our world, it's not the only way to do it, but we will put on events where there's hardly any predetermined speakers. Everything is crowdsourced. I just want to acknowledge, since I brought this up, I don't want to leave somebody feeling like I'm leaving them hanging. Intellectual capital, it's one reason people come into a community. I need to learn some stuff so I can solve a problem or live a better future, whatever it is. The second form of capital is social capital. right? Some people do enjoy connecting and meeting others who are like on the same path. But I just want to go back to a caution and a need. The way we think of it is like there's an opportunity for an increased consciousness around how we deliver on these things in today's age. So social capital is people like to connect. Well, I talk to a lot of community leaders about events that they put on. This is an everyday thing for us. And we ask them what's important. And they say, well, we want people to meet each other. Okay, good. Of course. That's great. And then our next question is always sincerely, we want to know, how's that going to happen? When is it going to happen? Where's it going to happen? And the common answers are, well, during that 10:30 a.m. bathroom break or at lunch, like when there's an hour to eat, or during the open happy bar hour. Now, you're kind of smiling at the answer, and your inner voice may be thinking what mine often does. Like I'm thinking, I'm a parent of 5 kids between the ages of 10 and 15. So at 10:30, when I'm checking in to make sure my 15-year-old son is not beating the crap out of my 10-year-old son, that's when I'm going to go find that next important partnership. Or over lunch, I got 13 employees. Like I'm checking in at the office or on my email, or I'm an introvert. That open happy bar thing, I get as far as fast from that as I can. So good people with good intention, Shana, are designing events and they're saying connection matters, but they're leaving it to the cracks and the crevices. It should be in the center. So we have to learn how to design experiences where people are connecting through conversation, right? And when we do that in a healthy way, it actually delivers on communal capital, which is the experience of belonging, which interestingly now actually brings everybody more present, more capable of learning. So I know I gave you our example of 2.5 days and the whole thing is crowdsourced. That's extreme. There's also ways to just bring conversations into any gathering that can really bring the learning alive and alive from the whole group, like you said. And it always does start with knowing how to design a question in what we call choreograph a conversation, which doesn't mean you're overly controlling it. It means you give reverence to giving people a structure so that they have the freedom to flow into a conversation. So there's a important need for some precision in how we bring people into these so that all of their energy and attention can go into connecting with each other. So we can take this wherever you want.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so funny because you're kind of reminding me in this whole idea of disrupting this business conference and event industry. It reminds me of Salman Khan and his One World Schoolhouse book. My husband was a teacher, and his whole concept was, why are we bringing children into the classroom to be instructed and taught at and lectured at, and then sending them home to work out the problems on their own or with a parent who's incapable of helping them? Why are they not watching lectures and instructions at home at their own pace, essentially, and then being brought into the classroom when they're all together in the presence of the teacher and other students to collaborate and learn as a collective? And it was like such a simple concept. And when you hear it, you go, well, obviously, otherwise, why did we bring all these people together into this room? But when it's always done a certain way for such a long time, that pathway is just built in our brain. This is how it works. And then when somebody else looks from the outside and goes, why are we doing it this way? This doesn't make sense. We're missing out on this. And they peel the layers back and you look and you go, wow, of course that makes sense. When we're together, when we are giving time and space to be in a room at a certain time, we would expect the experience to bring more value and a different sort of value, like you're talking about this communal capital, that's different than watching a YouTube video on 2X, right? So that's what you're creating, which I love, because so many events nowadays, they are doing more meetups and these kinds of things at events, and they're proud of their app that has the profiles, which allows people to connect, which really just allows people to spam you oftentimes in different events. So they have the desire for what we're talking about here, but they don't have the art of how to create that experience, because it isn't something that you can just throw people into a little section in your conference hall or throw them into a virtual breakout room and expect them to know how to create that communal capital on their own. That's just not something that most humans are designed to be able to do. So that concept of being able to really choreograph, as you say, that experience, I think is important, because there are people who are really trying hard to do this. and it's not resulting in the return on investment that they're looking for. And in some situations, because I do membership surveys with a lot of my clients and I read a lot of these where people are saying, my breakout room was awful, somebody dominated the entire conversation, or this person cried the whole time and that was too heavy for me. And the very thing that they intended to add value to the member experience actually ends up being the thing that causes a member to cancel because the experience was so negative for them. So it's almost even dangerous to play in these waters if you really don't know how to do it in a very thoughtful and intentional way.
Well, I agree wholeheartedly. And maybe I could give a couple examples of the kinds of questions and activities we facilitate, just to bring this further to life. So one example would be, and everything that I'm here to represent, everything I say, in person or online, it works the same in both environments. And a lot of people don't even believe that because they haven't seen it, but it does. Everything we teach, taught to 25,000 people who've come through our trainings, we first developed it in person, and then we had to do it online, and then now we do it everywhere. So just that's an important disclaimer. Our event in a couple weeks. And in case anyone's like, this is just a commercial for his event. No, it's not. This will air after the event and you can't buy a ticket if you wanted to. It's interesting. No one in the public can ever buy a ticket. Like, you have to have gone way through our certification. So the way we open our event, first of all, the way we set the room. So even though we have several hundred people, the whole room is in one big circle and another layer of a concentric circle. So all eyes can see all eyes, almost literally, right? Depending on where you're sitting in the room, we bring nature into the room. We spend thousands of dollars on bringing trees into the room, and we get rid of dead wood, all the furniture, because we're going to want to move through that space. The name tags of our event have the headshot of every single attendee on the name tag. Everything that people see, hear, and feel in a physical space matters. It's true online as well. So there's tremendous attention to the physical container. And then I think the thing that most people would be curious about from our conversation thus far is, well, okay, what about how you're moving people through the actual agenda? One of the ways that we open our conference after we sing and dance, because we have live musicians and we think that's important. Like, it engages the body, it brings play in. It's all optional, but it's part of who we are. Once we're all ready to start, we hand the whole room a question. Okay. And I'd love for you to contrast what I'm about to describe with how a lot of really well-intentioned community leaders would try and achieve the same outcome, which is, how do we get everybody to feel like they belong? One of the ingredients to belonging is the mythology of the group, the story, the shared transcendent purpose. And the way we look at it is there's 4 or 5 levels of activating shared purpose, or a shared transcendent purpose. Level 0 is there isn't one. Level 1 is there is a transcendent purpose, but the community leader thinks the way to activate it is to tell people what it is. But that's just like control and coercion disguised in nice language. So beyond that is you actually present a question to the group. Why are we here? Why are you here? Why are we here? Beyond that is you give the space for people to listen to each other's answers. Now, the highest activation, this is a ritual of ours. This is how we open up our event. And by the way, a lot of the biggest companies in the world have brought us in to do the exact same thing. We take several hundred people, break them into small teams, and after they all share, here's why I'm here, in a small group, they then co-create an answer to, after we've heard each other, why are we here? And then using art or some sort of creative representation, these groups present to each other, to the whole room, their answer to why are we in this room. Now, anybody who's listening to this, I just want you to compare the difference. Option A is I, the community leader, holding all the weight on my shoulders, am going to try and give an inspirational speech and tell everybody why we're here. It's very well-intentioned. But option B, which honors so many different fundamental realities about how people learn and how people engage and how people buy in, right? So instead of the passive option, how do we activate? Instead of asserting, make it a question, right? And instead of just assuming that I'm going to convince everybody, stop and give space for them to convince each other. And then let them tell each other. That's our opening 45 minutes of our annual event. And I'll tell you, we have people who come to the event in that opening 45 minutes, they're like, I'm done. Just Give us the next 2 days. We don't need an agenda. We know we are all in the right room. By the way, that's the opening 45 minutes. We then send everybody to dinner, where instead of us giving the whole room a question, they now give each other questions at the dinner table. We have an activity we created years ago called Creator's Choice, where now every participant is offering a possible question to the table, and they all get to choose whether or not they answer each other's questions. So I could actually articulate our entire 2.5 days as a dance between a question that we give to the room or questions that they bring to each other, right? But I just wanted to bring to life an example. I can give you plenty more, but I'll just stop with that and see what it brings up.
Yeah, I think for me, that one question in particular reminds me of something that we often have clients do, which is when they have new members come in, I always tell them, like, our goal in our onboarding experience is for people to leave feeling that I'm in the right place, this is possible for me, and I know my best next step, right? Because a lot of people craft their onboardings to be, here's where to log in, here's where you find your resources, and then here you go, here's a library of content. And so we really want to bring in that whole idea of like, well, in order for somebody to feel like they're in the right place, they need to understand, like, why are we here? What is the purpose of this, et cetera. And then in order for them to feel like this is possible for them, they need to hear stories of people that have gone before them, right? And they need to feel cared for, seen, and supported in that experience. So we often encourage them to have a live call where they're able to go on, they're able to hear again sort of the intention around the membership and the support and resources that are there for them, but also have the chance to ask questions. And then we encourage them to have a breakout session where everybody in the breakout session is sharing collectively why they are here. Why did they join? And so not 45 minutes, right? But even just a small opportunity for people to voice collectively why they have shown up for that membership. And I wonder if even something that small can make a difference if it's a piece of a call that they don't have full space for that. So I'm curious, like, how those things can weave together.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so let's keep pulling this thread. So the conversation you and I are having right now is about inviting a member of a community, either individually or depending on how you craft an experience collectively. But let's just focus on the individual for a moment because it's important. Inviting them to connect to a sense of purpose or meaning around both their work and discovering how that is a part of this bigger community, right? So why don't I give an example? I get paranoid about not giving practical examples. So I want to give everybody a way to take what you just said, a few different creative directions. Okay. So, and we've led a version of this for thousands of people. So I'm not just shooting from the hip. This works really well. So, and this is online and you'll see why. So questions that connect people to a sense of purpose. The way we see it, there's 3 types of purpose questions. There's 11 types of questions in total in our model of how we teach all this. I gave an example earlier of why is it important that you're here? Right? And there's more in how that question is presented, but that is a very simple question, but I would never dismiss how profound the answers can be, even though it's a simple question. Let me give you another version of a purpose question. So I got an online gathering, I'm onboarding new members, and I don't have 45 minutes, I got a lot less time, but I want people to be connected to each other, to the community, and to themselves, all through one experience. A question you could give them is, what is a change that you are here to support in our world? This is called a future-oriented purpose question, just to be silly about being technical. None of that matters. What's a change that you're here to support in our world? Now, take it to another level. If you're on Zoom, as you know, everybody's either at home or at an office, and we call these boxes full of props. So one of the things that we'll do is we'll say, hey, you all have 30 seconds to walk around your office or your home and to grab a physical artifact that serves as a symbol for a 30-second story that you're going to tell about the change that you're here to support in the world. And they go and they get their artifact, and then they go into the breakout room, and they all tell a story using that artifact. Now, we can get into the neuroscience of why do you invite lateral thinking and the metaphor and the creativity. I'll just tell you, it gives people a freedom and a safety. They have this thing that they get to use as a metaphor, and everybody knows it's all unscripted. And so there's a comfort. And by the way, anything we ever facilitate, everybody always has freedom of choice. They don't have to participate in anything. They're encouraged to. The kind of people who are there are probably going to. But I'll give you one more thing, is they share the stories. And then if anybody's ever facilitated an experience and one of your fears or insecurities, and it's a very rational fear, is what if I invite people to share in front of the whole group and nobody raises their hand? Here's one way to solve that every time. The instructions we give is you all go share your stories. And then as a small group, we'll give you a few extra minutes to ask follow-on questions or appreciate anything anybody said, and nominate one of your examples to be shared with the whole group when you come back from the breakout. All right, nominate. Don't overthink it. Don't overvote. It's not a big deal. And when they come back, who is nominated? All right, I got a whole bunch of digital hands now, and I'm pulling stories now into the room. And that experience I just described, that whole thing can be 15 minutes or less, but people learn so much about each other so fast in what becomes a creative, meaningful, playful way. Like, I'm looking at my desk. I pick up a picture of my mother, and she passed away this year. And it's like the things that people will grab and the stories they will tell will give you this accelerated glimpse into who they are. And this is available through Zoom. Like the whole idea of like online meetings are no good. No, that's a misdiagnosis. It's called, I don't know if I can use profanity on this show. It's called poor meeting design. It's called poor meeting facilitation. That's one example of what you just shared and how you can add a little creativity for what it's worth.
Yeah, I love that example. I love the idea of making it tangible, adds a little play and fun to it. It gets people moving too, which is kind of silly, but just like the simple act of looking around and expanding your vision even can do something psychologically to your brain that opens you up for connection, which is awesome. And so when I think about this, I think about this onboarding experience, which is kind of layer number one, but then they get into the membership and there's different types of calls that are typically happening. I'll kind of put them in two buckets for us to think about. So one bucket is like the coaching call or the feedback session where we have maybe 2 to 5, depending on the coach or the therapist or whoever's working with them, members that will come on live, ask their question or share a little bit about what their challenge is, and then they'll get coached or supported in front of the group. Now, I have seen some clients who have intuitively, when there's a natural question or thought that comes out of that conversation, they might do something after they coach somebody that's like, Sally brought up a pain around anniversaries. And I know that's something that we may all struggle with. So let's just take a moment. We're going to go out into breakout groups. And I want you to just share what you do to celebrate or honor or grieve around anniversaries. And then send them into breakout groups for a few minutes. They share, bring them back, and then move on to the next person to coach. When you have those types of calls where the bulk of the call is to go deep live in front of everybody with one person, how do you foresee opportunities to facilitate the connection of the hundreds of other people who are watching this person get coached? And they're in the comments connecting and supporting each other and supporting the person being coached. But like, how could we take that to another level?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a lot of things that could take it to another level. And by the way, let me start with my premise, my starting point when you're describing what you're describing is not that the process you described is broken. You can just do exactly what you said, and that can be beautiful. And there can be opportunity to take things to a whole other level. So I just want to offer that preface. So I've seen so many ways. Here's one thing you can do. On occasion, so we run many different types of calls. And what you're describing, we have a version of that. And one thing we do is because for us, constantly connecting members to each other is a part of our ethos, even when the main purpose of the call is one person highlighting a few, we will still connect everybody on the call by doing something like this. We'll say, hey, everybody, welcome to our coaching call today. Before we lean in to start coaching Shana, Jon, Tim, and James, before we start coaching them, we're going to drop you all in a breakout. And the invitation is for you simply to meet each other where you're at and welcome each other to the call. Now, we have a culture where everybody knows what that means, and they all know that everyone has the freedom to be who they are, and they have some skill in inviting that welcoming. Some of them they'll invite a deep breath or two, or someone will offer a question to the 3 or 4 in the breakout. What's been the best part of your day, or what's on your mind today? Like, they greet each other. Now, is there a risk in doing that? Sure, but I'll take the good with the risk, because when you connect them with each other, let's just talk about the nervous system for a second. If we want people to be attentive when we're coaching the 3 or 4 or 5 people, and we want them to be in this present learningful state, there's a part of the brain that they need to access. If people are not regulated in their bodies, you can't even get to that part of the brain. The fastest way for a human being to regulate is actually through co-regulation, through small group interactions. We are wired as humans to get to a place of psychological safety more efficiently through a small group interaction than any other way. And so it's serving a lot of benefits to just kick everybody informally into a welcome each other for 5 minutes. And by the way, I, as the coach, get to breathe. I get to see who is here and like check my own energy. So that's a small thing that you could do. And we bring them out. And you know what I'll often do is I'll say, do any of you want to just share anything you want to notice or appreciate from your welcoming? I just did this last week. Like 6 hands go up. There were 30 people on the call, and just them bringing their perspective in, it humanizes, it weaves the fabric of voices. I've had 6 voices come in before I take over as that sage on the stage, which is beautiful because it sends a message that our community is about weaving the connection between the members before I become that coach, right? So that's like a simple thing. A derivative of what I just described is I've run calls where I have 100 members show up, and I don't know who I'm going to coach. And what I do is I say, okay, first 3 minutes, I might lead a few deep breaths. I say, if you have a burning question, put it in the Zoom Q&A. I put on background music. They put it in. And I set a timer for a minute or 2. And maybe a third of them put a question in, a fifth of them, it doesn't matter. Then I give another minute and I say, hey, go look at each other's questions and vote them up. Like if somebody has one that you're like, we need to lean into that. Like I want to let the collective intelligence tell me where to put our energy. Give them a minute. It doesn't take long if they know what we're doing. Okay, go greet each other. Go welcome each other for 5 minutes. And then I'm like, boom. I look at the thing. Here's the 5 people I'm going to coach. The collective intelligence has already told me who to lean into. So you asked, are there derivatives or variations aside from just they show up and we coach, which doesn't mean there's anything broken with that. Yeah, we could keep going. There's lots of things you can do to activate. I'll give you one more. So this is very common for us, whether it's one of our coaches coaching a few people in front of a lot of people, or if I brought you, Shana, to our community and you're like a guest teacher, let's say I was interviewing you. So what I would do, and you can do this in any group coaching session, but if I brought you to our community, before I started interviewing you, let's say we agreed ahead of time that one of your main topics is going to be about belonging, right? I would have the entire attendee group, when they show up, I would give them all a question. When have you experienced belonging at its best? Think of a story and a lesson from that story. I give them a minute to think about it, right? I would send them into a group to share their stories and their lessons. They'd come out of those groups maybe 7-8 minutes later, and I would bring in their examples. Now, if you follow this story I'm telling you here, I want you to think about this. If you're a guest teacher in my community, and you get to hear 4, 5, 6 of my members share their stories of when they felt belonging and what they learned, I want you to just consider this question. In that moment right there, before I've started interviewing you, how many positive outcomes are being achieved both for our members and for you? And for me, the interviewer. Let's just talk about our members. Number one, if there were cameras off, they turned on when they went into the breakouts. And we know how to create the culture where they're all on in the first place. Number two, people went from possibly distracted to really present. It's really hard to reflect and be in a conversation with 2 or 3 other people in a breakout and still be distracted. right? We don't have ground rules. We don't tell people to put their devices away. We inspire participation and presence through our processes, not coercion. The third thing is they went in that breakout. They co-regulated through that small group experience. The next benefit of this whole thing that I'm describing is they learned from each other's stories, which symbolically reminds them the wisdom is in the community. You want to know one more benefit? They're reminded through that breakout that if their example was one, it may remind them that they are capable of either belonging or creating belonging. And what's more important when we're teaching, for people to believe in the possibility. Now, what about for you? We're 12 minutes in. You haven't started yet, but you now know where our membership is. You know how they align. You get now everything you say, you can call back to their examples. So I'll interview you for 30, 45 minutes. Here's how we'll close it out. Most online events or in-person events like this, there's one of a few traditional ways to close it out. Our way of closing it out is when you and I feel complete, I'm going to ask the whole audience, what's the greatest gift you're going to take from our time with Shana today? And guess what? I'm going to send them into a breakout. And they're going to articulate that. Now, in our community, our culture is one where people look forward to that moment because they know from a pure experiential learning theory standpoint, you may have said 20 amazing things. They're going to forget all of them, except for the one that they speak out loud in that final breakout. That's just basic experiential learning theory. So guess what? They come back from that breakout, and it's not me, it's not you that has the last word. It's our members. And it's kind of cool when you were just featured in front of 200 of our members, and before you leave, 4, 5, 6 of them come up on the digital stage and say, Shana, the greatest gift you gave to me today was. How does that make you feel walking out? How different is that from so many other experiences that teachers have when they come in? We call that an experiential bookend. But you can take these more passive events and put interaction on the front and the back end. There's a caution. Here's what will make all of this not work. Like, I'll lose sleep if we stopped and I don't say this. You have to understand how to create a cultural norm and get agreement where people show up ready to participate.
I'm so glad you're talking about this because it was going to be sort of my last question, which is you briefly mentioned we don't have to coerce people to turn their cameras on and do all of this because we have a culture where people just know. And I think the challenge that I've seen when people try to facilitate breakout sessions is that they can see in Zoom when that breakout starts 17 minutes in, all the people that drop off the call, right? Because they don't want to be in the breakout session or have their camera on or don't understand the technology, whatever it might be. Or we see in the comment section where people say, I got put into a breakout room with 5 people and only 2 of us talked. So that's the piece that I'm like, yeah, talk about that a little bit, because that becomes the thing where I encourage people to try this, and we do kind of try to frame it up on the call and all of that, but it ultimately can end up being a negative because of the culture is not there to support it.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And this is the risk. And I'm a big fan of, I think there's too many people like me and you who want to be of service to our students, and we don't. I'm calling myself out. Too often, I do not historically point out to people the risks. Like, if you don't perceive the risk actually becomes greater. So you have to understand the risk, and I'll tell you how to solve it. So, and I'm going to give you some data. So we have certified or trained, I think, 3,000 plus people in our methodology. Those 3,000 people came from, and by the way, as they went through all of our certifications, which has a lot of live stuff online, 95% of the cameras are on. Those 3,000 people came from one marketing channel. And if anybody ever wants to see how I do this, just go find our website, come to one of our free workshops. We do them every couple months or so. I still today lead them myself. So I'd love to meet you live, like say hi. It's not recorded. People, they seriously think they're watching a recording. And we've had 25,000 people come to our live 2-hour workshop in the last 5 years. So there's a reason I want to lay out that data point. Those 25,000 people are meeting me for the very first time. And by the way, 90% of the cameras are on. So I want to tell you how we do this. First, there's an underlying fundamental principle. The culture of the gathering does not start when the gathering starts. Right? The culture doesn't start when they log in or walk in. The culture starts with the earliest touch point. It starts with the invitation. So we have to know how to invite people in a way. And I give you our formula. There's a 3-part formula for how we invite people so that they show up ready to engage. And by the way, you can take this lesson about the culture of one event and extrapolate it out. This is true when you look at the culture of your whole community. Because it's not just the culture of an event starts with the invitation to that event. The culture of your community starts with the moment they met you the first time. So this is like, people are like, you guys cracked the code. And I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, Jon, the reason you run 120 online events just within our membership, all cameras on within a year, is because the first event people ever met us, we laid the foundation for them to be at that event live and experientially. So I'm going to tell you how we do that. So when people come to our 2-hour introductory workshop, which is, I told you 3,000 people, they all came through the same intro. When everybody comes through the same experiential front door, they are learning, whether or not they realize it, this is what it's going to be like to be a part of this community. So if you do it right up front, it's not that hard later on. If you don't do it right up front, you got to work at some point. Here's how to do it. When people sign up for our 2-hour workshop, there's 3 keys to how they've now registered, to how we now invite them. And I want everyone to remember this. An invitation has to be more powerful than a notification. Okay? You and I and everybody does everything we can to literally avoid the thousands of notifications that are coming our way. So there's a reason the word invitation is so important, because it's got to cut through the clutter and it's got to achieve things. 3 things to a compelling invitation. Number 1 is it has to get attention because of what I just said. So part of how we get attention is when people register, and we apply this to every event we lead, it's just there's different ways you can do it, is we tell them, hey, if you're going to come to this event, we're only asking you to agree to one thing before you show up, and it's presence. Just presence. Now, we'll articulate that and you can make it what you want. You know, sometimes it's if you're going to come, you're there from beginning to end. If you're going to be there, you're not walking or doing things in the background. If you're going to be there, you're able to see and hear and interact. You can add those descriptives, but the transcendent ask is, are you willing to be present? Now, this is a soul-searching moment for a lot of community builders, because there is a downside to everything I'm saying right now. And that is there's an entire world of people who are accepting of themselves and others of showing up and being partially present, doing things in the background. Shana, I and our team made a decision 7 years ago. We're willing to lose all the business and all the registrations and all the participants to be a stand for presence. Because I struggle just like everyone else to be present because of this technological age. So this is a soul-searching, confrontational, like principle-centered question a convener has to ask is, are you willing to take this stance? Now, getting attention is the first thing. The second thing is a good invitation. It has to invite alignment. It has to invite alignment. Now, what do I mean by alignment? Alignment between my plan to do these experiential things that we've been talking about for the last hour and their expectations. Because the biggest reason everything we're talking about will not work is they show up thinking I'll be able to walk the dog, check through my email, be partially there. But I can't do all the things I'm promising. Like, I'm going to create transformation. I'm going to create belonging. I'm going to do this in an introductory 2-hour workshop. These are big promises. I can't deliver that if half the people are not present or any majority are not present. So alignment. And one little key, like a bonus on this point, is if you really want to get people to buy in, whatever reasons we give them needs to be their reasons, not mine. This isn't experiential because I want it to be. This is experiential because basic experiential learning theory says this is how I'm going to get you what you're here to get. This is experiential because that's the very thing you're here to learn. This is experiential because whatever it is, whatever I'm going to do, my reasons need to be for them, not for me. I know that could sound obvious, but sometimes it's not. Here's the third key to a really compelling invitation. We got to get attention, whether it's what we put in writing or using video, or there's lots of other ways. We've got to aim for this alignment. The third key is about agreement. You'll notice I don't use the word rules. It's an agreement. A rule feels kind of one directional. An agreement feels two directional. Now, last thing, that's the goal of what we put in writing before they come to that 2-hour workshop. And because of that, 80% of whoever shows up, 90% cameras are on. So what do I do about the people that showed up that still aren't ready for it? Well, a lot of people are like me. They don't read any of those emails we sent. So in the first 5 minutes, I reestablish that agreement. Say, hey, how many of you saw the agreement and are down to be here? And if you are, put a note in the chat, right? And we have a whole script of how we do this because we point out in today's age, people send their AI robot note takers. So like, we just need to know that everyone here is a human, like, because we're leading a human experience. Like, people realize it's so practical what he's asking for when we ask for it in a dignified way where we treat them with respect by saying, here's why we're doing it this way. And if there's a few people that their cameras are not on, I don't shame them or call them out. I just say, hey, this is our free public 2-hour workshop. I say, hey, use the next 5 minutes to decide where you ought to be. Who am I to tell you? If you got to be somewhere else, just go. Find us another time. But if this interests you, then be with us because we're going to do some cool things. And then we rock and roll. So you got to set expectations. It's our responsibility. Last thing I'll say, the beginning of the pandemic, I'm sure you and I and a lot of folks like us who started doing things online may have had one of those moments where we're at an online event and it's like 90% of the cameras are off. And I'm not saying there's not certain circumstances where that makes sense and there's exceptions, all that. But I remember leading an event and thinking to myself, why are we even here? This is demoralizing. And I got pissed off at the attendees. And I did and said things that were totally, like, looking back, immature. And one of our team members reminded me of one of our own sayings that we have at our company. They're like, Jon, don't forget. And the saying is, if I'm not the problem, there is no solution. And what I realized was they're not showing up ready to engage because I have to take ownership over all the things we just talked about. So 5 years later, we've finally dialed it in. I just want to encourage people. You got to take that ownership of doing the work to get people there the right way. I hope this was helpful.
Yeah, it's incredibly helpful. We talk about one of our 4 C's of community is culture. And the way I outline that for people are beliefs, behaviors, and boundaries. And essentially what you're talking about is this whole concept of like, we hold these core beliefs around this type of experience and why doing it in this unique way is valuable, not only for you, but for the other people who are there. And so there are certain behaviors and boundaries that we need to align around. And it's kind, actually, to set those expectations early on. And this is why many of you who are listening, who have worked with me in any of my programs, you've heard me say a million times, like the most underutilized aspect of a membership are your event reminders, because so many of you just go, event name, it's on the calendar, or like your next Zoom session is blah, blah, blah. And we need to always be motivating and encouraging people and giving them a reason to show up for that instead of watching season 2 of the Netflix series that we're binging, because that's really what we're competing for in regards to attention. So I really appreciate you outlining that in such detail, because the way that you explained that makes it very easy for people to think through how to apply that to an event. And we talk all the time about that first interaction. Pre-onboarding is what we call it. Like, onboarding doesn't begin once they pay and become a member of your community. It started way back when you first engaged with them. And if that experience and that culture with you isn't consistent, that's what leads to high churn and a membership. And it's fascinating because throughout our conversation, I've just been nodding my head. Yes, 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 this is all so good. And I realized that I teach this retention accelerator framework, which is results being the first thing, which everything that you're talking about, getting people to show up, getting people to tap into the collective wisdom, getting people to see within themselves why they want to be here, and finding answers within their own experience. And honestly, being able to apply what they're hearing other people work through in coaching calls to their experience, that leads to better results. And then secondly is relationships, where obviously that connection with each other ends up becoming a sustaining factor in whether I'm a part of this membership for the long run or whether I'm just here to get some content and leave. And then the third thing is recognition. And that recognition, I always have to to kind of reframe it for people because they think that means gamification and gold stars. But at the end of the day, it's that person is seen as an individual, that they understand they have something to contribute, and that the things that they contribute are validated and seen in a way that allows them to contribute more. And so it's so fascinating how the very thing that you're doing through these facilitated experiences, both online and in person, is tapping into all three of those retention accelerators that we try to create within our memberships.
I love that framework. Results, relationships, recognition. That's cool.
Well, Jon, I know we could talk a lot more and we could dive into all 11 question types and all of the things. There's so much more that I want to learn and that I know everybody wants to learn. But I think what I really want is to encourage people to attend one of the workshops, because I've attended it. And as you're talking through it, I'm like, oh, yes, I remember studying the thank you page, studying the initial invitation, studying the reminder email, because you did those things. You are practicing exactly what you're preaching here, and getting on that call and having you all say, this is your time to decide where you want to be. And I would guess that the majority of people listening to this right now have never experienced a virtual event or virtual call like what you all put on. So whether you're interested in getting a certification or not, or no matter what, if you are somebody who is bringing people together, and I think about this, I actually just spent yesterday evening at a leadership meeting at my church with one of the new pastors who was talking about our redesign of our small groups, now called C groups, but how these small groups are going to be a place that aren't about Bible study or whatever, but it's going to be more about the communal gathering of members, and how do we facilitate and create this place of safety and connection in this communal gathering. And I'm sitting here listening to what he wants to create and what you're talking about and going, oh, well, we just need the exchange approach. So then we're going to, but I think it's so true that whether you are actively running an online community, whether you're hosting in-person events or not, whether it's in a business scenario, a church scenario, whether you're a nonprofit, I know we have lots of nonprofits that listen as well. This skill of being able to choreograph an experience that helps people tap into the communal wisdom of the group, I think is a skill that will serve you for a lifelong skill and increase the impact of whatever it is you're trying to do in the world. So I love that you have 3,000 plus people that you've taken to the depths of learning how to facilitate this. And I'm so grateful that you continue to host these in person, well, virtual, but live workshops where people can experience it for themselves, because it's a gathering that I think you really don't appreciate until you're on the receiving end of it.
Well, Shana, thanks for having me. And your comments here about our workshop are very generous, and I'll do my best to live up to it all. And thanks for what you do. Thanks for what you stand for. And anyone listening who is a stand for building community, it's something that is so needed in our world. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And if you're looking for the link to the workshop, they have them all the time. The link will be in the description, of course, and highly encourage you to check that out. Thanks, Jon.